everyone. This is Gillian Dagan. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at ABC Research Laboratories. I'm also joined today by Lori Stevens, who's one of our business development folks, and she concentrates on the food service sector. I'm glad you've joined us today. This is our webinar, part 2 of 2 on nutritional labeling for menu items. Last week at this time, we did part 1. Part 1 was kind of an intro to the proposed rule that the FDA has out there for menu labeling of, or nutritional labeling of menu items. Today, we're going to talk about the mitigation of risk and what that means when you're going to put out a large amount of information into the public sector. Before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of background about ABC Laboratories. ABC Research Laboratories was founded in 1967, and we are an independent third-party testing lab. We are based in Gainesville, Florida, and we do business with folks all over the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean. We are what's called a full-service lab. That means we do nutritional labeling, but we also do microbiological testing, all different types of chemical testing, including FDA-detained items, pesticide residue, antibiotic residues, and we also do physical testing and sensory testing. So I always tell people we pretty much do anything you can think about doing to a food. I'm coming to you today as the Chief Scientific Officer. Part of my job is to be the interface between the lab and the public, and the lab and governmental agencies like the FDA. So hopefully today we'll get some good information to the audience about how to mitigate risk and some of the best practices that you can think of when doing nutritional labeling for menu items. I'll be talking for the bulk of the presentation, and then I did say that I'm joined by Lori Stevens. She'll be joining in at the end to help answer some questions and talk through some points. So I'll go ahead and let Lori give you a little bit of her background.
Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to the webinar as well. I'm new to the ABC team, but it feels like I've been here a long time because I've been a client of ABC's for quite a while. And funnily, Gillian and I went to graduate school together, so it's nice coming back home here. I have spent 17 years in the food industry. Most recent of that was 11 and a half years at Darden Restaurants, where I started as a benchtop scientist in microbiology and analytical chemistry, and thankfully had the opportunity to work myself up as a team leader doing supplier quality management. So working with all of the suppliers to ensure that they met the microbiological and quality parameters that were set out. So I feel like in that time I've gotten to do and see a lot of different things, and I'm hoping that my experience and knowledge can be a resource for you all as you go about tackling the challenges that I know you face day in and day out, every hour of every minute in your jobs. So please do feel free to give me a call. I'd be happy to help do some troubleshooting, problem solving, and just be a general resource for you.
All right, great. Let's get started. And as we go through the webinar today, if you're a panelist or a attendee and you have a question, you will notice there is a little button on your GoToWebinar console that looks like a little hand. If you hit that, that's like raising your hand in class, and it will go ahead and ask a question. I'll try to keep an eye on those and answer them as they come, but if I don't get to it, I promise I will address it at the end. All right, so general update on what's going on. On June 28th, we saw that the Supreme Court upheld the Affordable Care Act, and you may be asking yourself, what does that have to do with menu labeling? Well, that's actually, the Affordable Care Act is actually the act that contains Section 4205 about menu labeling. So a lot of folks were kind of, holding their breath, waiting to see what happened to nationalized health care. And with it being upheld at the end of June, we do know that the FDA has the authority to go ahead and write an act or write a regulation and put that into effect to have restaurants provide calorie counts on the menus and then all of that additional nutritional information to customers upon request. And they have the ability and the power to now enforce this regulation. We do, the word on the street is that final regulation is going to come out in November. I personally expect it will probably debut after our elections, so mid to late November. And if you're wondering, oh gosh, well, I have a while till November, but how much longer after November do I have until I have to be in compliance? Well, the draft proposed rule actually only gave folks a 6-month implementation period. I do know that the National Restaurant Association, along with some other chain restaurant groups, did lobby the FDA to have the implementation period be at least a year or more. That's what they were asking for. It'll be interesting to see how much leeway the FDA gives folks. So it could be 6 months, it could be 9 months, it could be a year. I don't think we're going to see anything over a year because the FDA has kind of been hot and heavy on this since March of 2010. But again, November of this year, we should have the final rule. So today, since we're talking about risk mitigation, really preparation is key, and timing is a lot of the battle when becoming compliant under this rule. So, you know, now that we've seen the Affordable Care Act be upheld, you know, this regulation is coming. The FDA has the power to write it. So trust me, they're going to take that power. They're definitely going to enforce a new regulation. I don't think there's anybody out there that could say, well, we might not have to do this. Yeah, you're definitely going to have to do this. So let's just have a plan of attack. So to have that plan of attack, we're going to create a timeline. And what I would suggest is the minute that final rule comes out, we definitely will be contacting all of you guys since we have your information to say, hey, here's the final rule, here's the link, here's the synopsis of it. Because knowing the FDA, it'll be, you know, a couple hundred pages. But, you know, go through a synopsis, go through the parts that are going to apply to your restaurant chain and understand that rule. And then specifically hone in on that implementation period. And what I do is I like to work backwards. So I know if I have 6 months to implement and become compliant under a regulation, I'm going to say, okay, I know my due date to be compliant. I'm going to work backwards and think about all the different things that I have to do in the time that I'm given. So working backwards, let's go ahead and ask ourselves some questions. So working from the end of the compliance period, how long will it take me to replace all menus, menu boards, and drive-through menus? So, you know, it's not just, okay, I got to get all this data together and I have to be able to share it on my menu. Well, that means reprinting a lot of printed materials. You may have to-go menus. You may have menus that you hand against the table. You may have menu boards if you're kind of more of a quick serve concept where folks walk in and they look up at a menu board to order. You may have drive-in menu boards that have to be replaced. So when you start thinking about all of that and thinking about how many locations that you have in your chain, you know, that's menus and menu boards and drive-through menu boards at every single location. And just logistically getting those, you know, installed, if it's hardware, getting them reprinted, if you're talking about printed materials, you know, working backwards, formatting all of those things to now contain not only a menu item's name and its price, but also its calorie count, and not having it be, you know, unfortunately too crowded so it's confusing to the guest. You know, it's going to literally be a space constraint on a lot of menu boards to fit all of that information in and have it be easily readable and easily understood by a guest. So, you know, that I couldn't imagine, even if, you know, let's say you have only 21 locations, you only have menus to reprint, that's still a lot to get done. I would allow at least a month. Now, when you start talking about menu boards and all of that, again, nothing ever works as easily as we think it does, so I would always say multiply by 3 for however long you think it's going to take, and take that off the end of your allotted time. All right, secondly, how long will it take to get a final draft for all printed materials, including menus, menu boards, and additional pamphlets? So again, there's that reformatting time. Also, keep in the back of your mind that you're probably going to want to have a training period for your staff to be able to answer questions. You know, when a guest says, well, what's this 362? I thought the price was $2.44. Well, sir, that 362 is the number of calories in a serving. And guests are going to ask questions about that. So you want to make sure that not only are your printed materials ready, but your employees are ready to answer questions about them as well. All right, so again, working backwards. How long will it take to organize all data and reportion items if necessary? Now, we're talking about getting nutritional data for items. Okay, well, that's kind of one of the easier parts of this. But what happens when you, as the quality and safety person, or you as the purchasing agent, or you as the culinary director, look at the items and go, oh my gosh, the CEO is going to kill me if I put out a menu item with 1,600 calories. And that's just one serving. We need to cut down some of our portions. We need to figure out some different options on the way that we put our menu items up for sale so we can change some of those calorie counts. So, there may be a couple of rounds in your testing where you say, okay, we're going to look at all of our, items in round 1, round 2, we may pick, 5 or 6 that we want to cut down the serving size and see what the calories look like then. So again, it's also depending, another thing to consider is depending on how many toppings you have for items, how many side dishes you have that can be intermingled, sauces, salad dressings, all of that. It's not hard to get the nutritional work done. It takes a lot of time to organize it in a way that your marketing department or your CEO is going to put their stamp of approval on. All right, again, working backwards, how long will it take to get a full lab analysis on cooked items? Now, if you joined us for the first webinar in this series, we did talk about the fact that there are 2 different ways to generate nutritional data for menu items, one of which is a full laboratory analysis. You would want to do a full laboratory analysis on items that undergo very large changes during cooking. So anything that comes off of a grill, anything that comes out of a deep fryer or off of a flat top griddle. As you can imagine, looking at a recipe for hash browns and looking at the actual finished product of hash browns really wouldn't translate very well. You probably use a lot of oil to fry the hash browns in, but you're not serving every bit of that oil to your guest. So that would be something that we would want to do a full lab analysis on, where you would actually send us the food and we would do the analysis. We do work with our clients, at least our lab does. I can't speak for my competitors, but we do work with our clients to provide packaging and shipping labels, all of those little things that can just help you as a time saver and as a frustration saver get your items to us at the lab. Now, once we receive items at the lab, we usually say a fair guess is for a batch of 10 items, or even I'll say 10 to 20 items, we can turn around that nutritional analysis in about 10 business days. If you're looking at your menu and you're seeing, okay, gosh, we have such a large menu, I'm probably going to need to get about 55 full lab analyses done. I would say give yourself 20, 25 business days just to make sure that, you have time to plan what you're going to sample, send it in, and then get the data back. And we're going to talk about sampling in a second. All right, next question. How long will it take to generate database nutritional analysis for simple menu items like salads and sandwiches? So this is the other way to get nutritional data. So if you have things on your menu that are very well represented by their recipes, so like a sandwich, a salad, a fresh salsa or sauce, where when you look at the recipe, you go, yeah, I just mix all of those things together in those proportions and I get my menu item. There's no cooking that's going to change any of the attributes about the food. Those items are perfect to use a database nutritional analysis on. And what's good about the database nutritional analysis is it does save you some money. It is a more simple approach because it can be used for the simple menu items. It also allows you to save a little bit of time. As far as how long it takes us to generate a database nutritional analysis, it's about half the time of a full laboratory analysis. So usually for a batch of 10 to 12 samples, we're talking about 5 or 7 business days to get that all wrapped up once we have your recipe on a per weight basis and we get any nutritional information on proprietary items. So if you have a proprietary dressing that you have made for you that may be part of a recipe, we would, on your behalf, contact your supplier and ask for that information. And we also do work with you folks to review your recipes and your formulations, make sure they're in a per weight basis, and kind of make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row before we start that nutritional analysis. Because if you get the recipe wrong, boy, you can really have some inaccuracies in your nutritional labeling. So we want to make sure that everything, all the information that we have and we've shared is correct before we start that. And that may also take some communication between you and the culinary department if you are not the chef, or between you and purchasing, just to get all of the suppliers straight, figure out if there are inconsistencies between the East Coast and the West Coast of the U.S. There are a lot of questions that you end up asking that you'd never think of in a million years, and we actually can provide you with those questions. All right, so again, working backwards, before you're actually ready to get all of the nutritional analysis done, how long will it take to gather nutritional data from suppliers for items like sauces and dressings? You know, you may have some items that you buy stock from a distributor. Let's say you buy a Thousand Island dressing from Cheney Brothers, and it's just a Cheney Brothers stock item. You're still going to want that information for use on your menu. It always takes a while to correspond, even if we all love email and it seems to be fast, to get the right information from your supplier. So that's another kind of limb in this big nutritional labeling tree. And then finally, the first question really, what is the time required to source labeling quotes and budget for this work? You know, the company that I work for provides this service. We do have competitors out there, and I welcome you to compare us to any of them. And that's what a good, responsible person doing sourcing would do. You know, contact a couple of different labs, ask about accreditation, ask about timetables, about price, about how much help you're going to get before and after you get that data back. You know, there are a lot of questions to ask, and if you're trying to work that into your budget, you know, that's also something that you're going to have to show that you've done your due diligence to purchasing or whoever holds the purse strings, and then again working this into your budget for the upcoming year. So overall, what have we learned? Well, 6 months is pretty much a joke. How the FDA put that in the proposed rule, I'm not quite sure, because it is a lot of work. The actual getting the nutritional analysis done, that's easy. It's all of the stuff before and after. So again, it's good to look for a partner who does support you through those processes that are the before and after, and kind of just helps walk you through the whole process. It's interesting from a lab testing perspective, because we deal with so many industries that are so heavily regulated by both the FDA, by the USDA, Department of Commerce, that a new regulation to us is just something to learn and know. For the restaurant industry, what we realize is that that's an industry that's never really faced too much regulation, no regulation from the FDA, and then of course a small amount of regulation from business and professional services. But we're trying to make it as simple as possible on restaurant folks, and again, that timeline is going to be crucial in your success. So when that final regulation comes out at the end of November, hopefully it won't be 6 months. Hopefully it'll be at least a year. But even with a year, it's very easy to fill up that timetable with everything about how to decide, how to get your menu items done, getting them done, and then how to handle all of that information at the end. All right, so let's talk a little bit about responsible sourcing. What type of things should you be asking for when you're looking at a partner lab to provide you with these kind of services? Some people say, I'm worried about accuracy. How do I know that the values are correct? Well, one thing you should definitely ask a prospective laboratory partner about is accreditation. Not all labs are accredited, And what that accreditation actually tells you, if somebody says, hey, I'm an ISO 17025 accredited lab, what does that mean? It means that that lab has a quality assurance program in place to assure that they are putting out accurate data to their clients, and that all of their record keeping, all of their quality assurance and quality control measures are in place and are also audited by an outside party at least every other year. So ABC Research Laboratories is ISO 17025 accredited. We have many, many, many paper trails that accompany every sample and every test on every sample to make sure that we're putting out accurate data. And we can always pull those and show those to you, to an FDA officer that may be questioning data. It really does show due diligence on our part as a lab services provider and on your part as a responsible sourcer of a lab partner. All right, so also, what if somebody questions my nutritional values? What type of support can I receive after the analysis is completed? It's a great question because somebody is going to question your nutritional values. It might be a consumer, it might be an FDA officer, it may be one of your competitors that feels that your values are inaccurate and you maybe have a leg up in the market on them. At ABC Research, we don't just hand back the data. We actually, remit reports to our clients and then help them deal with organization of the data, how to use the data correctly. And then if somebody does question your data, we are happy to speak with that person on behalf of our clients and explain what quality control measures are in place, why the data that we've given you and you've published is accurate, and all of the supporting paperwork with that. So we always provide support after the fact for our clients, and we feel that's one of the things that differentiates us in the marketplace. Just something to note, as we're going through these questions for responsible sourcers, the questions that I have in these slides today are also available in a white paper that I've written about questions to ask a potential partner laboratory. I know that when you guys signed up for this webinar, you were probably on foodtestingexperts.com. That is our website, foodtestingexperts.com, and on there you can also download the white paper that has this and many, many, many more detailed questions that you can ask to any laboratory, so you can kind of compare apples to apples. So it's a good thing to have at your disposal. So, somebody has a question. Let's go ahead and go over that. What was the ISO accreditation number again? The ISO accreditation for laboratories is 17025. So that's 17025. That number specifically goes for testing laboratories. If you're in production or engineering disciplines, you may have heard ISO 2200, ISO 9000. Those are for production facilities. ISO 17025 is for lab facilities only. So that would be the ISO number that you would hear. And thank you to Chuck Ellis, our marketing manager. He in the chat for the entire group, you actually have the link to the white paper I just mentioned. So thank you, Chuck. That's excellent. All right, let's move on. Okay, so when we're talking about gathering information from suppliers, again, this is for a stock item that you may be purchasing. So let's say you're buying a stock Thousand Island dressing from your distribution center. What you would want to request from that supplier is a 100-gram unrounded nutritional information panel. It's a very specific thing to ask for. They might balk at it a little bit, but they all have this on file. What they're probably going to try to give you is a 2-ounce serving size, which is about 60 grams, rounded values. And I'll tell you why you don't want that. You want to insist on the 100-gram unrounded nutritional data because you don't want to take the rounding of certain numbers in their nutritional data and propagate that error throughout all of your recipes that may use that Thousand Island dressing. So, for instance, let's say that you have a fat value that in the unrounded form is 0.49 grams per serving. So not a lot of fat, 0.49 grams per serving. Well, under the FDA rounding rule, the FDA allows you to round down to 0. Now, you can imagine that's for one serving size, so that's for 2 ounces. Let's say that you use this ingredient in a 12-ounce form in your recipe because you're making something in a big batch. It's not really 0 grams of fat times, 6 iterations of the serving size. What you're doing is it really should be 6 times 0.49. So again, there are going to be rounding errors where you can round down to 0, or you can round down to a lower increment, like maybe you can round down 2.72 down to 2.5. That's perfectly fine, but again, if you're not working with the unrounded numbers, all you're going to do is propagate false data throughout your whole recipe. And again, is 0 grams of fat really 0? When you're looking at a serving size nutritional label, no, it's probably a value that rounded down to 0. But again, if you're using more than a serving size of any particular item, you definitely want to have that unrounded value so you have proper addition of all the different nutritional constituents there. It's a little bit of a confusing concept, but if you guys have questions about it, I can always email you something. I know I'm much better visually with numbers. I'd be happy to walk through it with any of you guys after this webinar.
And Gillian, if I could add something here, the
Sure.
interesting thing that I've seen in my experience is that suppliers of a liquid product will often give their serving size in volume with no way of calculating that to a weight. So I would encourage the attendees also to push back on suppliers to say, make this into a weight-based sample and not a volume-based sample, because then you'll have to do density and calculations, and you could perpetuate more rounding errors moving forward. So suppliers have their information in all kinds of crazy forms that are sometimes not very helpful.
Yeah, that is a great point. When we do nutritional analysis or do database analysis, we work in per weight only. Chefs love volume. Your suppliers are going to love to give you information in volume, and it gets very, very tricky. So everything we work with is in a per weight basis. That's a great point. All right, so proper use of database labels. All right, so we talked about there are 2 different ways to get your data: database, which is great for simple menu items, and then full laboratory analysis should be used for all other menu items. So in the database labels, formulations are used to estimate a nutritional value. That means we're going to be looking at literally the recipe for the dish. So let's use a salad, for example. We know that it's going to be in a per weight basis for your salad greens, your carrots, your tomatoes, your cucumber, your green onions, your mushrooms, and your dressing, let's say. We will use specifically, let's say for that dressing, if it's a stock dressing, we're going to use the manufacturer's 100-gram unrounded nutritional values for that portion of the recipe. In addition, we are going to use database values for all of those vegetables I just named off. In the database software that we use that is accepted by the FDA, there are standard nutritional values put in there for all different types of fruits, vegetables, any food you can think of. So you would give us, again, your nutritional, your recipe on a per weight basis, and then we would build that menu item in the database. Again, database labels are appropriate for menu items that will see little to no changes during preparation or cooking. If you can imagine looking at the recipe for a salad, That salad is going to be exactly that when you put it on the plate. Same thing for dressings and sauces that don't undergo a cooking step, or a sandwich. Okay, on the contrary, full laboratory analysis. This is actually doing the hard chemistry on the menu item itself. So getting the food item, extracting the fat, quantifying the protein, extracting the total dietary fiber, quantifying the sodium, all of that, it's actually the hard chemistry. And this type of analysis should be used for items that undergo changes during cooking. In addition, this is specifically database nutritionals too, but this specifically needs to be done by an ISO 17025 accredited laboratory. When you're talking about doing hard chemistry, this is the type of work that you want done by, food scientists, analytical chemists, folks that are trained and this is their discipline. This isn't something that you can knock out in your garage on a Saturday afternoon. This is hard science, and you want to have a quality assurance system behind that hard science to make sure that you're getting accurate data. Some items, some examples of items where this would be appropriate. Again, baked, fried, sauteed, or grilled items. You can imagine I have a nice New York strip steak, has a little bit of good marbling in it, and I have it marinated with some salt and pepper, maybe some Worcestershire sauce, and I'm going to grill that item as a menu item. Now, if I think about the recipe so far, I have my steak, and it's raw. I have my salt and my pepper, and I have my Worcestershire sauce. So if I looked at just that and did the nutritional analysis just based on that in my database, is it going to be exactly what somebody gets on their plate when I serve the steak? No, it isn't. We're going to see a lot of things happen once that steak goes on and off that grill. We're going to see fat render off. We're going to see the steak lose moisture during cooking. We're also going to see some of that marinade and some of that salt and pepper get knocked off as well. So you can imagine that if I didn't do a full laboratory analysis, if I just looked at the recipe for that item, number one, I have all my fat there. I have all my sodium there from my salt and from my marinade. I'm already going to have artificially high salt, artificially high fat values. And again, with moisture and fat rendering off during cooking, there's also weight loss there. There are a lot of factors that you cannot control. So that's why we implore you to go ahead, send in that menu item, do the full laboratory analysis on it. That's the only way you're going to get accurate data for menu items that undergo cooking like that. Same thing in a deep fat fryer. If you think about a breaded chicken tender, that breaded chicken tender is very, very different when it comes out of that deep fat fryer. It's lost moisture. It's absorbed a ton of oil in that breading. There is a cook yield factor there. It's very, very different nutritionally after the fact. So again, there are very specific rules about when you should and should not use a full laboratory analysis or a database analysis. And it takes time as well, to go through your menu prior to submitting samples and really try to figure out what category foods fit in. Specifically, ABC Research for our clients, we tell you, hand over your menu. We're going to ask you a couple of questions about it, and then we will go through and we will earmark what category certain menu items fit into. And we'll go back to you, the client, and let you give some feedback. Let us in on some commonalities in the menu. For instance, if you use the same chicken breast for topping your salad as you do for a kid's entree, as you do for this appetizer, we're only going to test that menu item once. But handing over your menu and having a little bit of communication about those menu items, it makes it easy for us as the experts to go ahead and earmark those items into the proper category so you're going to get the nutritional data done correctly. Okay, again, not to beat the dead horse, but two good examples of when to use a full nutritional and when to use a database analysis. I'm sure there are several of you on the call today that will have to take this information back and share it with your team or share it with your boss. Two foods that are great foods to use as examples in communicating the idea are hash browns and chicken wings. With hash browns, you can imagine taking a ladle of oil, putting that on your flat top grill and throwing your potatoes on. You know that when you get done cooking those hash browns, there's going to be an appreciable amount of oil left on that flat top grill that nobody's ever going to consume. You don't want to have to account for that as you would in doing a database label. You want to do that menu item by a full nutritional analysis. In addition, chicken wings, another great example. I have my chicken wings cooked. I'm going to toss them in my buffalo sauce. I'm going to put 10 wings in my bowl. I'm going to put 2 ounces of buffalo sauce in there. I got my tongs. I'm going to toss them up. Once they're nicely covered, I'm going to plate them, and off they go. Well, if I look back down in the bowl that I tossed my wings in, again, appreciable amount of buffalo sauce left over. And we all know that there is oil, salt, calories. There's a lot of, specifically a lot of calories that, would be accounted for in a database label, but you know that nobody is going to consume those. It really wasn't picked up by the food. It's not going out to the guests. And I don't want to account for that when I have to publish my caloric values on my menu. So again, hash browns and chicken wings, 2 great examples to use with other folks when trying to explain why you need to do certain dishes by a full lab analysis. In addition, if you want to have an example of how to categorize menu items, I did also write a case study that's in the form of a white paper. Chuck Ellis, again, thank you. Our marketing manager has put the link up on the chat for everybody. So you'll see it there. I believe I do go over both the chicken wings and the hash browns in the case study. But again, it's something where you can download it off our website and have it, in your file to kind of show other folks and justify why you're going to test certain items a certain way. Thank you, Chuck. All right, so portioning on your menu. All right, do I want to revise serving sizes based on the data collected? That may be a question that you're going to be asking yourself when you get back all of these nutritional data, all the nutritional data on your menu items. So you may look at some of the calories that you're going to be forced to publish on your menu and just about have a heart attack. A lot of us eat out as an indulgent act, not necessarily for a healthy meal, and that's going to be something that's, no pun intended, but hard to swallow. That's going to be hard to swallow for guests. It's also going to be hard to swallow for restaurateurs to have to put that on their menu. So I would encourage you to put in enough time in your timeline to get the data back, have a meeting of the minds, and decide if you want to reportion or change your serving sizes on any of your apps, entrees, desserts. There will be some wiggle room in the final rule about variable menu items and buffets. And we saw this in the proposed rule. If you have variable menu items, which would be like combo meals where you can pick different side dishes for a certain entree or different sizes for a combo meal, all of those things, there will be a couple of different options on how to list all of those different combinations on your menu. The ones that were offered up in the proposed rule were to publish values as either an average of all of the different combinations, showing median value, or maybe, if you'd like, to show a range of the healthiest to the heaviest, so lowest to highest calorie range for a group of combo menu items. Additionally, for those of you who run buffet institutions, buffet actually has an interesting choice. You can either publish the calorie count, you have to publish it next to the menu item and with the menu item's name on the buffet, so that's not a choice. But you do have the option of either giving calories in a serving size amount, or you can give calories in a discrete unit amount. So this may be something that you'll want to toy with when you get your nutritional data back. If I had chicken nuggets on my buffet, let's say a serving size is 3 chicken nuggets. Well, I have the option of putting calories per 3 chicken nuggets, or since I'm on a buffet and somebody might not pick up all 3 nuggets, or they might pick up more than 3 nuggets, I can say there's blank number of calories per nugget, because a nugget would be a discrete serving piece. So again, build in time to look at your data, review it, make sure you're comfortable with it, and then time to sit down and decide if there are things you want to change and what options you have on displaying that information. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about required statements and optional text for the menus. So what types of information are you going to have to disclose? And we go into great detail on this in the first webinar in the series, so I'm going to kind of move over this part just in generalities. You do have to have calories next to each menu item. You have to have a succinct statement for daily intake of calories, and there were examples given in the proposed rule. So FDA is going to give you that 1 or 2 sentence verbiage to stick on there. And then you do have to have a statement about additional nutritional information being available on request. And again, that will probably be a pre-written statement coming from the FDA. Is there anything voluntary? I know some folks are looking into allergy declarations on menus just because it helps out guests who do have food allergies. But again, this is completely voluntary. I think the biggest takeaway really from this slide is think about what information you're putting out there and who's going to go after you for it. An example that I like to use is, if you're in direct competition with someone else and you have a lower calorie menu item that's very similar to theirs, that might be seen as a marketing ploy. Hey, our chicken salad is 150 calories less per serving than so-and-so's. It's going to be head-to-head competition like that that's really going to get a lot of your menu items questioned. Secondarily, you may actually see questioning coming from, unfortunately, your local news station. If it's a slow news day and they're looking for something to do, we've seen them do it in the past. They will head down and kind of, secret shop a restaurant and check on nutritional value. So anytime you're putting information out there, whether it's required to be disclosed or it's a voluntary declaration, somebody's going to question it one way or the other. So it's good to know that you've done everything right from the day that you started the process, that you know that you sampled correctly, that you've done the analysis correctly, you have professionals handling that, and then you've published it correctly. So just, again, making sure that you have all your ducks in a row through the entire process. Okay, so things to consider. Again, we talked about the timeline at the beginning. There's a timeline for picking and choosing service partners to help you throughout this adventure, getting the nutritional analysis actually done, and then at a certain point, how do you handle all of that information, and how do you prepare your chain as an enterprise to handle questions and all of that? So think about educating your staff at every location on, if people are looking at these calorie counts and they're kind of freaked out and they know that their doctor has told them, not to overeat, you're going to want to educate your staff on what are some healthier menu options that they can maybe guide a guest to, where those guests can go to find the additional nutritional information when they ask for it. And that's something that I'm sure the FDA will give guidance on, whether it has to be in written form in the restaurant, whether that you can refer people to your website. That's going to be an interesting question to see how the FDA answers it. But again, having your sales staff just know where they can get that information to give to a customer. And again, if you choose to do something like a voluntary declaration of allergens, it's important to train your staff to know how to answer the question of, I'm allergic to peanuts, does the sauce contain peanuts? It's just having them have a familiarity with the dishes down to the ingredient level. And how do you get that information and that training out to your people and making sure that they're well trained before you give the public that kind of information. Again, timeline to replace all menu boards, drive some menu boards in-house and takeout menus. And then if you decide, well, 2 things. If you decide to reportion any of your menu items, to create maybe a low-cal or a light fare portion of your menu, or if you identify some menu items that already fit into that category, it might be a great opportunity for you to kind of use that in your marketing and saying, hey, you know, we did all of our nutritional analysis and we've identified 8 menu items that are less than 600 calories each. You know, and we're gonna put a box around those and a big fat star by them on our menu, and you know, this is going to be our light fare menu, and you know, the marketing folks are going to go wild over it. You can do that for calories, you can do that for fat, low in sodium, whatever menu items you choose to really hang your hat on. But again, that's going to be education for your staff. It's going to be reprinting of menus, and maybe some reportioning of food items. All right, and one thing that I'd actually like to go through, let me back up a little bit. I said it out loud, but then I realized I didn't have it on my slide. Let's talk about full laboratory analysis for just a second. When I did mention that you want to make sure that you sample your menu items correctly for testing, and that's something that I failed to touch on this slide, so let's do that now. When you send a lab samples for nutritional analysis of a menu item, what we're going to ask you to do is we're going to ask you to cook that menu item just as if you're going to serve it to a guest, and that means if you sprinkle, you know, parsley on it at the end, sprinkle the parsley on it at the end. If you do a squeeze of lemon, squeeze the lemon on there. You want to fix it exactly as you would for a guest. So obviously there's variation in how menu items are prepared, and that is, I'll definitely say it's well known. I hope it is going to be well recognized by the FDA in their efforts to enforce this new regulation, because there is a lot of variation that happens in the back of the house. That being said, to try to mitigate some of this variation that we know is inherent in restaurant food, what we do is we'll ask you for multiple servings of a dish. Usually on an average size entree, we're going to say at least 3 servings worth, so 3 plates for 3 guests pretty much. And what we do on our side is we're going to take a weight of each one of those menu items. So we'll have 3 distinct weights. We'll average that to get an average weight, and then what we'll do with all of that food is we blend all of it together. So we composite those 3 or more samples into one big sample. And what that does is it kind of averages out any of the variation that might exist between those 3 or more samples. If one has a little bit larger dollop of sour cream than another, you know, it's all going to come out in the wash, because we're going to composite, and we're going to test that composite just one time. So we're averaging out a lot of that variation. That's probably one of the biggest concerns with the restaurateurs, is that, you know, there's a lot of variation in the back of the house. It's not like we're making little cookie cutter foods like the retail sector that's been regulated for years. And they're hoping the FDA recognizes that. But in addition to them recognizing that, I think it is also a best practice to do some compositing of multiple samples just to knock some of that variation out of the system. So I will leave it at that. And I think we have time for some questions, if anybody has any. And while you guys are thinking and typing questions, Lori, I'm not sure if you have some questions that people have forwarded you that you'd like to ask on their behalf.
I do. Let me pull those up. There's one question that I think is very interesting that someone sent me ahead of time about the different municipalities, Gillian, that already have these laws in place. So I think there's, at last count, about 13. So, you know, the city of New York and, you know, those kinds of bleeding edge municipalities that are having menu labeling requirements in place. So how is the federal regulation going to interact with these regional requirements?
Sure. we have seen a number of municipalities that have come out over the last couple of years asking for their own versions of this nutritional labeling for menus. They've all had a little bit of a different spin, which, as you can imagine, if you have a nationwide chain, is pretty frustrating. To have, let's say somebody on the West Coast asking for one thing, have somebody on the East Coast asking for something else. So recognizing this and seeing it as a more and more popular trend, the National Restaurant Association actually said, okay, we understand that people want nutritional data. We understand that it's Congress sees it as an opportunity to better society, give them more education about what they're eating and more choices, give them more power when they're making choices. We know it's going to be a lot of work for our industry to comply. However, we would much rather be in control and have one standard that would supersede all of these different municipalities and what they're asking for. If you have a nationwide chain, again, you're putting together something for San Diego, something for New York, something for Memphis, something for San Francisco, and none of them were the same. So the National Restaurant Association just said, you know what, we want one federal regulation put into effect by the FDA, by the people who, are the true food police, and it's just one regulation to comply with no matter where your restaurant chains are. So actually, this going into effect supersedes any local laws or regulations that are in place now. All right, any other questions? And again, it's a lot of information to take in. If you missed part one of this webinar, please join us for it. We will be scheduling one probably in the next month or so that goes through kind of the nitty-gritty of the proposed rule and what that probable rule in November is going to look like. And also, after the fact today, if you start thinking about what you learned today and you have questions, do go onto our website, foodtestingexperts.com, and grab those white papers. I'll toot my own horn and say I did a good job at explaining kind of what you're facing and giving you some hard and fast examples of how to handle the different issues that arise when you go to do nutritional labeling on a full menu. So I think there's some good information out there. And again, you have my contact information and Lori's contact information. I know Chuck can also throw those out there in the chat window, so you guys can get a hold of us directly. Please feel free to email or call us at your convenience. Right. So I'll give just, go ahead.
I was going to say we are both going to be at the IFPA meeting coming up in Providence, Rhode Island next week. So if any of the attendees are going to be there, they can stop by the booth and we can have a good discussion face to face.
Yes, very good point. Thank you, Lori. All right, I'm going to throw our two email addresses up on the chat for you guys to nab, and also the lab phone number. And that phone number allows you to reach either one of us. Just ask, and we're always happy to take calls and answer questions. So thanks for attending today, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.